It's live, Chair.
Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi kia koutou. Welcome to the Parks, Reserves and Environment Subcommittee meeting. Welcome to members of the committee and welcome to staff and those watching electronically. We have received a number of apologies for today's meeting. Kawhakihiri, Matchwork, Tumahai, Katmiuli, Riley Burden, Worship the Mayor, Councillor Neil, and Donna Beers. I ask that someone move that the apologies be received and accepted. Move Joe Parson, seconded Biddy Manero. All those in favour? Aye. Aye. Those against? The resolution is carried. Thank you very much. Second item on the agenda is the declaration of interest. It's a hard copy interest register that's been circulated now. If you have any amendments to that, can you please make them known to the committee secretary, or if they relate to a matter on the agenda, time we consider that matter. The third item on the agenda is urgent items that have not yet been placed on the agenda. And I can confirm that from a staff perspective, there are no matters. Are there any matters that the committee would like urgently placed on the agenda? No. Thank you very much. We move through to the minutes of the previous meeting. The minutes were circulated electronically to committee members. And we're looking for whether the minutes are true and accurate record of the meeting held. If someone who was present could please move that. They believe that. Move second here, seconded Rob Daniel. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? That resolution is carried. And I can now prove that my digital signature be added to the confirmed Parks, Reserves and Environment Subcommittee meeting minutes of the 18th of November 2020. Thank you everyone for that. We now move into an update on the action list, agenda item 5, and welcome the Chief Executive Simon Bastian to speak to this.
So I'm just waiting for it to arrive. Oh, sorry.
No worries at all. We'll take each action item at one at a time, and we'll have a discussion in relation to that action item then, and we can close it or create further action and move on. I think that might be the easiest way with the list we have, as they're all quite in particular.
So good afternoon, committee members. First action is to council to create a master management plan for each of the reserves. This is going to be presented as part of Simon Eyre's presentation today, and this is something that we must do to ensure we have an overarching reserves management plan. It also plays into future aspirations of some other organisations to actually get involved with the Parks Reserves Management Plan. Any questions on that?
Straightforward, thank you.
Gives a key heritage area, set a meeting developed. So that action plan was completed alongside Heritage Activity Group. And I'll take questions on that.
I have a question. What is the action? Like, what's going to be undertaken down there? Do you know?
In terms of the outcomes of that, I don't have the list.
So there's been a list compiled.
Yes, there was.
Okay.
Obviously, the custom house is one of the critical factors in it. We have Heritage Activity has been successful in funding, or sourcing funding, so we'll be working with them on the action plan for that execution of that process.
Okay. Rob, is it possible to have a list of agreed actions circulated to the subcommittee?
It needs a refresh because there's a lot of work that had been completed.
Yeah, this was prepared, I guess, 2 years ago, something like that.
Back in September last year.
Oh, it was updated there. Yeah, I think we need to update that list. I'll work with Simon on that.
Probably needs it 6 months since we first compiled it, so we'll just do a refresh of that.
You'll work with the team here to do that, circulate it out?
Yes, yeah. I know there are certainly concerns about work that's not yet been done on that list.
That's right.
Okay,
At the
thanks.
same token, there has been progress made, so.
That's great.
Yeah.
One step forward.
The mountain bike club and vision, so that was presented recently at the Community Development Committee meeting, and very aspirational presentation it was too. Any questions on that?
Other than have we've been approached in regards to the correct forum for them to raise that formally again with council with the long-term planning cycle coming up. So it's my understanding that that will become part of a submission to council in terms of funding aspects of that, particularly the concept of a bike park or pump track at Sunset Point. So as long as we kind of know that there's community interest in something being undertaken down there that's around cycling, and that we're highly likely to receive submissions on the matter through the LTP process.
That's good. So just to highlight, the LTP does have another application of funding for beachfront upgrade part 2. You know, that concept is in the draft, so we'll be working through that in terms of funds that actually allocated.
So can I ask a question on that? What would you recommend as the next sort of, other than the long-term plan submission aspect, which is that probably more focused on the flow park idea, is what if that crew or a crew of people wanting to push that bigger aspirational vision forward, not just the flow park, what would you recommend as the next thing to do?
So there's a number of ways to approach it. As you know, we have the West Coast Wilderness Trail. If we want to look at a overarching wider strategy around cycling and walking for the district, it sort of fits into a larger version of just a cycle trail. So how do we engage in terms of making Hokitika a cycle destination rather than just a cycle trail that we have already? There's other types of cycling that this Weather Mountain Club presented to us. So there's ways to attack it. We have an asset management plan that's been developed for the Wilderness Trail. Potentially that could be expanded to look at cycling in general, cycling and walking as a way forward. That asset management plan is the first in New Zealand to be developed for cycling for the Wilderness Trail. So it is sort of a benchmark to start with. I think following the submissions is that further thinking then sort of lock down a way forward. But it also fits in the recreational space as well. So it may be an aspect of parks and reserves that we need to focus on doing wider than just what's currently a reserve, and other aspirational goals for that. Does that answer your question? There's a lot of work in that space if we go down the track.
Yep.
The next action was the Heritage Walking Trail Group. I'd like to present to the next meeting, present in 2021. I've had a conversation with Jackie. There is no dedicated Heritage Walking Trail group. There's a Heritage West Coast, but obviously they've been tasked with taking the lead on the heritage signage work. So I've completed that work. The work that was remaining with David Stapleton, Jackie's actually asked for an extension through lotteries to extend that out because of obviously David passing away. So I will follow up with Jackie in terms of the next stages of that.
Just on the heritage walkway, there's the correspondence received yesterday in relation to the maintenance of that, particularly around the racecourse area. And I remember we put a nominal sum in the previous annual plan to throw some money at the maintenance of the track. So I assume that's the same matter, the heritage walkway, walking trail is actually the heritage trail that people refer to. So, is there any forward project to address the health and safety concerns around the track, quite particularly around the racecourse?
What I suggest as an action is that, task myself and Earl in terms of reaching out to the Mountain Club group as well, and they've taken some oversight on this as well. And I think we do a site visit to actually understand the true breadth of it. I know it's been looked at before, but I think it needs a refresh and actually an action plan to go with it.
I think the email was addressed to you as well, Bill, but I think it bounced. I think the name was spelled incorrectly. Erie instead of Bill. So it was just received yesterday, and particularly around the racecourse erosion, stormwater from the racecourse, walking tracks, and then the Brickfield walking track as well, which are all interconnected.
I did have a recollection that we did come up with a new design, but the landowner, it's not council property, and we were declined to have access to that area, so we have to come back and revisit this in another
we have, we have been working with a contractor in that area, and we've got some prices and things coming to address the immediate health and safety stuff, which is the piece basically from the racecourse itself up on the racecourse terrace, which is the bad bit. That's a piece also, as Simon said, we tried to shift, but we're unable to.
So basically change the gradient of that steep incline to take it further north and come back, switch back. That's on our property, so unfortunately we couldn't access that.
But we do have that money in the budget to do that immediate short term, irrespective of realigning it, to get it safe and trimmed back so people can walk through. Can we take that as a bit of an action to undertake that work? Mm-hmm. Any other questions on the heritage trail?
Lazar Park rubbish bins. I'll pass this action because I don't have an update on this one. Sorry. The Lazar Park rubbish bins, there was an action to put some bins there. We have any spare?
Yes, we do. We're putting refreshing some of the ones in town. And once that should be happening in the next sort of 6 weeks. Once we refresh the ones out here, put the new ones in town, we'll have spare older resources. Does cost extra to get it cleaned and emptied.
So, I mean, obviously I'm a Lion, and Lions have an interest in Lazar Park, but there was previously a bin there, and I assume it's captured somewhere in the bin empty contract. It was never serviced by.
It's not shown on our in the contract.
Okay. Yeah, so it may have changed. But the other thing is, aspirationally, the Lions collect things like car batteries, bottle can lids, AA batteries. So potentially there's an opportunity to do a bit of but more than just a bit, you know what I mean, to actually do like a wall or a sort of community receptacle for things that can then be put to the correct place, which might be the transfer station, but it may also be on selling car batteries or whatever. So probably more like what used to be on the beach with the sort of three, rubbish in here, recycling in here, and other all glass would be more appropriate, particularly like we're quite happy to take over that, but not the emptying and disposal of waste, which is we think is in a park is actually you're going to get all sorts of rubbish, just food waste, other things.
We'll review that at the meeting because it is quite expensive to run those recycling, the 3-stage bins for paper and plastics and standard waste. So it's quite an impact.
And the building that occupies that space, was on that space, actually does have a rubbish bin, council allocated rubbish bin and a council allocated recycling bin, so they could potentially be housed within a unit, possibly. That probably needs more discussion, but
Options.
Look forward to hearing your proposal when you've fleshed it out.
no, well, it's not like that. I think it's more, there's an option for council if council would like to pursue something. I
So
think
we have talked about, we have obviously a waste minimalisation project. We did talk about additional recycling centres strategically placed around the district. We haven't tracked out any further at this stage, so we'll take it on board into consideration.
and in the immediate term, just so we're clear, that's probably that's probably a long-term goal, like 1 year off. But in the immediate, you've got a park that's got high volumes of use with no bins at all.
Yeah, that will be good.
Cool. Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Earl.
Ross Cenotaph, this is following, I suppose, the councillor trip that happened last year. We actually stopped off with a lot of our assets, and obviously Ross Cemetery was one. Was noted that a lot of the grave sites and a lot of the cenotaphs were badly in disrepair. There's sort of a kick-off suggestion that we actually review how we can actually help in that space. It has to be led by the community as well, but willing to support the community and in terms of what aspects could be focused on as equipment and then look at a long-term program. There's a lot of graves that are untended by families, which is their responsibility anyway. There's a whole process that you have to follow to ensure you can actually do any modifications as well. So there's quite a long process. I think it's worth the effort.
So sorry, so that would be contacting the families of all those old, I've got a list of a lot of contacts.
Yes. So I think I would suggest a community, part of a community meeting going forward and raise it as an agenda item and discuss it there as the next step.
So for people not too familiar with Ross, the cenotaph is located at the cemetery.
No, that's opposite the fire station, police station, outside the school on the main street.
So this action around the cenotaph, what was that?
I don't think it was actually meant to be cenotaph, it was actually regards to maintenance.
I think it might be the cenotaph as well, because I brought that up, I think, at the
that's
last
right.
meeting or the meeting before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just so we're talking about two different things.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the
Monuments.
cemetery first. The cemetery.
Yeah.
There's that word.
Yep.
What about the boundary? Like, are we still mowing to the boundary? Because that was an issue in the past.
Like I got Department of Conservation, when they had some spare leftover weed spray, they did the gorse in that area that had originally been sold off and brought back. And corrections went and lopped it all down, but it's starting to grow again. But I've got a spray safe cert again now in backpacks, and Renus are quite happy to maintain that part, like to kill it off, but it needs, there's a whole lot of rubbish underneath some of that gorse. It needs right back to the old original fence line, which is on the ridge line, especially on the north side.
So we're proposing to do a visit in a couple of weeks south of Mill, so we'll catch up with you there for that as well.
Yeah.
So we're planning to do it with this road.
Yep. Cool.
Happy with that?
Yeah.
And any other questions on the Ross Cemetery before we move on to the cenotaph? Let's do that.
No.
The cenotaph. So
The
just
cenotaph,
refresh
yeah.
our memory on the cenotaph.
Well, it needs the World War II monument in the middle of the whole monument. That needs the lettering all redoing because it's so faded you can hardly read the names. It is etched, you can feel the lettering, but it needs redoing. And also the J.K. Allen one, the Boer War, the lead lettering needs replacing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So mindful that Anzac Day is in a week.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah.
Are there some immediate things that could be actioned?
Not that. I mean, I've already sprayed it with 30 seconds before Christmas and scrubbed it down, and it's come up really, really good. It's nice and clean. It's presentable. But the lettering does need doing, and it's quite a bit of lettering missing. And it's a specialist job.
So potentially as an application to
Yeah.
organisation to do that.
Yeah, Veterans Affairs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah, and yeah, the World War II one, especially because it's just a plain black panel with the white lettering, but the whole lot needs redoing completely.
Do you want council to take the lead on an application? Would you be able to do it?
Well, if you can, I can. Doesn't worry me. We can do it.
We have Veterans Affairs starting a large work
Yeah.
here in the Hokitika Cemetery, in which case we'll be able to have contact with the
Take it
project
on.
management and take him for a drive.
Yeah.
Show them the issues.
Yeah,
Okay.
because the
That'll be
World
easiest
War
way to
One,
action.
yeah, the World War One monument is fine. It's as original as it ever was, and it's etched enough that it doesn't need any ink or inlays.
Okay.
Yeah, it's.
But just to
fairly
clarify,
flexible.
it's presentable
Yep.
for NZ.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a medium, long-term project to bring it back to its
Yeah.
former glory.
Yeah.
That will be involving council and veteran affairs and
Cool.
yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah,
please.
okay, cool.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ross Trains Gardens. So quite a few things have happened since the November 11th. We've had a couple of community meetings. We've agreed on a concept way forward, which involves DOC, private landowner and council, and regional council. So we have an agreed height of the lake. So the concept here is to divert Jones's Creek as a at the top end of the lake, and with the outlet to maintain the level of the lake. So John Bainbridge arranged survey late last week, waiting the outcome of that survey, and then another site visit with Doc to look at the top end of the lake of Jones Creek. The timing of that will be when we're across in a couple of weeks' time. Any other things you want to add to that?
No, we've got the bridge sides are now 1.5 sides are done, and
Yeah.
we've got the last table and chairs in now. So yeah, we're progressing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And management plan for reserves. I'd like to, I suppose, pass this over as part of Simon's presentation later in the session. Questions?
Thank you very much for the update on the action list, Simon. It's really appreciated, and your staff. I think it's ably answering all our questions, and I think the action list resulted in more actions being added than anything being removed. So we appreciate it. We now move through to a resolution regarding the action list, and if someone's prepared to move and second that that the updated action list be received. Move Joe Parson and seconded Rob Daniel. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? The resolution's carried. Thank you very much. We don't have any presentations by external parties, so we'll move through to agenda item 7, which is staff reports. And welcome Bill Benich, the operations manager, Western District Council, to speak in regards to the Parks and Reserve contract review, which was a previous action item, and we welcome Earl.
Thank you, committee members. Yes, today, just for the committee here, what I've brought to the table is selected portion of the current contract document to review through. I've also supplied external review that was undertaken of the existing contract to see where it was and if it's fit for purpose as it currently stands. So I'd like to discuss that afterwards for a closed meeting. But I would like to say that I know it's a very emotive and passionate item for people, parks, reserves and terms and all that type of stuff. It just needs to be made aware that the more we increase the levels of service or add additional items, it also increases cost. The current contract we have got is actually reasonably priced as it is. That's fine. It's not going to, I have to say, it's probably not going to stay that way. It's not going to be a reasonable price. It's just not going to be as low as it is now because the contract is so old. So, people have to be aware that it's going to impact on rates somewhere.
Thank you for the update on where the staff see this issue at the moment. Are there any questions in relation to that update from you?
No.
Someone prepared to move that the Parks and Reserve Contracts Review verbal update from the Operations Manager, Western District Council be received.
Yep.
Moved by Manera, seconded Joe Parsons. Put the resolution, all those in favour? Aye. It's unanimous, thank you very much. Thank you for your time, Al.
No,
And oh, sorry.
So one separate item while we were talking about cenotaphs and war memorials, the one that's in Cat Square is about to be partially dismantled. It's got structural items that need repair, and the top part and the stands are going to be taken away off site to be repaired. But the site will be available for any celebrations or commemorations.
Okay, that sounds like a very good move forward. You've obviously worked in with the RSA around the decommissioning of that, and iwi in terms of Tekanga around that.
Well, it's not quite so prevalent because we're not moving the nameplates of cenotaphs, so the central piece itself, it's only the additional piece of structure.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just to highlight on that point, the RSA is planning to hold the RSA celebrations, but ceremony around the town clock at 6:30 on Anzac Day.
Thank you very much. We'll talk about the clock soon, I'm sure, in regards to the next item, which is the reserves tidy up action plan, and foreseeing a more future focused discussion. So we'll welcome Simon here, the property project supervisor, to speak to the subcommittee. Thanks, Simon.
Afternoon, committee members. I think I have to use this little machine to discuss this issue with. Now, in thinking about quite a large number of actions that we continue to receive and accumulate, we actually had to take a step back and address the contract and what we actually get out of the contract. What are the stipulations of the contract for reserves maintenance, and also look at what is being requested and do they align. And we have an issue, and I've made some pictures because I speak in pictures. Once I figure out how to, I will speak in pictures at some point. But pretty much we need to take a bit more of a backwards view in order to get the overview, and so we can plan our way forward. So we have an existing maintenance contract. The picture on the left, it's got a really thick rim around it. Basically, you can think of it as a box. I'll just put it into a circle for aesthetics. But if we think of our existing contract as reserve cemeteries, walkways, paths, etc., all bound into one box, we've got a contract that is quite hard to decipher in some ways. There's expectations that have grown over time, and we need to align both what the community wants and what our contract, how that's written and works. And that's the work that we've got coming up in the next year. So for us to lock in and be able to explain what we actually get for our contract helps answer the community's questions. Can you move forward? And so there's a lot of potential scope in what council can do in terms of the parks and reserves, but they will come at a cost. Currently, it's a very small package in relation to a lot of the questions that are coming in. But we also need, so going forward, if you can tap that through, please, me. Can I do that now? Okay, we're working. So if we think of each park, each cemetery as the larger, wider circle, we really need to create a development plan for each one of these existing areas. We need to identify, the area that's actually being talked about, the boundaries, the extent of the work, and then what we need to do is put it into a plan that says, this is what we want to do, this is where we want it to be or not, this is how we want to keep it. So we can identify and schedule the list of works that we need to do. We know that it's ticked off against our maintenance plan. And then if there's areas that we need to develop or the community says it wants to develop, then we can put it under a capital development program. So the plan is to have this to help staff prioritise according to what the community is desiring. So the idea would be to have that in a plan for each reserve, pictorial. We can mark off areas, we can describe exactly the work that we want to do, and we can get costings against it. And that sits as a document that would be consistently live, but will ultimately form how do we look after reserves, how do we go about it. Risk in that is that if we keep adding to our existing parks or adding bits and pieces in, the extent of it grows, and ultimately we have to expand the contract for maintenance to cover it. And we have to be consistent about doing that, or else we end up asking for more work to be done but not paying for it. We just need to align. And that's just a matter of proper process. And if we start doing this work, then we can get into it. So again, the project schedule, just have a graphic, a map, a prioritised list that feeds into our long-term planning, and we can break it down into those projects. So there's a few different ways that we can do it currently, these additional projects. We do it through our contracted day works. So that's just an additional cost to council as part of our existing contract. We just ask the contract to do this work, and they charge us accordingly. We could fund it through capital projects if it's a larger project, which again comes at a cost to the community. Or we could use an idea like a volunteer project team. We understand that there's a lot of enthusiasm for doing bits and pieces in the community through for the benefit, and maybe there's a way in which we can schedule works and have development works that community volunteers can actually work with council in order to achieve. So that's a bit of a body of work that needs to be worked through and discussed, but there's methods of delivery. So we have a document that we need to be continually developing, which is our reserve management plan. Master plan underneath that would be where we break down our desires for the reserves, the different projects that can sit within reserve and cemeteries. But we need to be hitting these things in the long-term plan and the annual plans and scheduling it out in the maintenance plan. So there's lots of documents that we need to be fulfilling, and this proposal really just helps us develop those up well. Can answer where are we going, and how do we get where we're going. And as a light example of what that development plan might look like, the cemetery, I put this together the other day, of known issues, areas that we know need to be developed or dealt with, including drainage, new cemetery shed, areas that we know that we've agreed to cover with grass and replace planting, replace car parking, possible boom growth. How do we plan for the future? What do we do? Realigning things, and just we can quickly and simply put these things together as a list of projects, and then if there's a committee like this one, to bring it to the committee and discuss what are the priorities, what things do you see, and use that as a form of consultation. And we can deal with that future growth, the scoping well defined so that we know what the projects are and what they're going to cost, and the staging and budgeting for both the developments and then how it reflects into our maintenance costs. So I see this as a way that we can better schedule the works that we know we want to do or that the community wants to do, and align them together so that we're actually working together on something and it's documented. Are there any questions?
So you'll be looking at, what's the year time frame? You'll be looking at 10 years, 20 years ahead, like for your future developments, to try and work out your scheme, so you know it's going to be easy maintenance of things.
Ideally.
Yeah.
But I think when we think about cemeteries, okay, they take a bit of time to fill up, but if we've forethought, okay, we'll develop this berm next, and then the one after that, and we know that allows for 20 years of growth. And that's good to put it in our planning for this 10-year plan. We might need to put some costing in at year 9 to develop the first section of berm extensions.
Ideally it aligns with the LTP. So the LTP has a 30-year horizon.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's some renewal programs that have to happen during that process, i.e., upgrades of equipment or whatever. So that should be reflected in the master planning work and maintenance.
Yeah.
This then dovetails into our asset management plans as well.
Same sort of things apply to, like, development around, say, the planted areas coming in and out of the township. What plants do we want there? What do we want to change stuff? Same in Cass Square, we've got planted areas there. Do we want those? Do we want different types of plants? What are we looking at going forward?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Chair, Simon, with the cemetery, at least there is an income stream of sorts. So does that get reviewed as well as part of the? I'm not sure I don't recall what percentage was. So I know the burials don't cover the full costs of operating the cemetery, and certainly not the expansion. I guess those income streams need to be looked at as well. Cass Square, very limited income stream, but
I don't think the cemeteries will ever be cost neutral.
so absolutely not, nor libraries or swimming pools.
Yes,
But this might go well towards us understanding it costs a lot more too.
Yes, yeah.
And we're I've got requests in with our contractor to provide better breakdowns of the actual costs. That way we can assess on a yearly basis if we need to adjust our fees and charges as well.
Yes, yeah.
Joe, no questions necessarily. I think I understand the process, and I think it's aspirational. I think the next step is actually putting rubber on the road and developing those plans. I'm not sure how we go about that, particularly with the looming LTP deadline of the 30th of June. How do we actually see a realisation of this work so we don't end up in a position where it comes back to us, we've missed the deadline, it's going to have to be 2022, 2023.
Great question.
So in terms of the current contract is
Runs through until the end of June 2022.
we can always bring that forward if we're ready to bring that forward with processes with council. But there's quite a body of work to get this to a point where it's actually usable. If you look at I don't know if the presentation is still up there, but if you look at that body within the contract, there could be groups or smaller entities that could apply for just a portion of that contract, i.e. gardens. Someone may want to take ownership of gardens within Cass Square, for example, as an entity, and could be able to tender for just that part of the contract. So I've talked to Earl about that this morning. That to me is what I would like to do going forward, but it comes as a lot of operational manpower to keep that, keep it, ticking over on a day-to-day basis. So in terms of looking forward, we'll need at least takes 2 to 3 months to ensure that a new contractor has all the right capabilities to deliver on a contract. It takes about 2 months to pull a tender document together. It takes another month to go through tenders. So we're talking at least 6 months worth of work before we even get to a point where we know what we exactly want to do anyway. So I'll rather start working on the management plans and lining up with the tender review date of the 22nd of June next year. June next year.
And in the interim, we're going to have to probably do some of those stay works and variations on contract.
No, so we'll agree to that. Yes.
Yeah, particularly if we've got issues like we've had.
Yeah, so the work that we've identified as a shortfall, we need to catch up and get that to a higher standard.
I really appreciate the presentation. I know the subcommittee do, Simon. Thank you very much. Someone prepared to move that the verbal update from the property and project supervisor be received.
I do have another question before we.
Yeah.
We've got the elephant in the room, the roadside berms in town. And there was talk in the last meeting of adding that, talking to the contractor and sorting it out and being done out of the goodness of the heart of the contractor. And, it needs to be sorted out one way or the other. It's not sorted now. The berms on Stafford Street are looking terrible again. So where does that fit on this? I think Earl will have the answer to this one if I can ask Earl a question.
Yeah, of course.
It's not funded as part of the roading subsidy,
No, it's not.
urban berms. Rural are.
Rural is once you get.
Huge amount of mowing done in the rural area. It's just a pity we can't tap into that funding, but I recall checking that out a long time ago, and the answer was definitely no.
It's not an easy issue to resolve.
It was deliberately left out of the earlier contract, just looking back through it now. It's not classed as a reserve, so it's definitely not on the reserves contract.
So what's missing from this council is a policy around berms.
Absolutely,
So,
it needs to be treated as a separate item
That's
from the
So
reserves contract.
we've started reviewing what other councils do.
Yes.
And the next stage is for us to bring a policy draft for council to consider as a way forward. So we've already started on that process. We are not ready to table anything right now.
Yes, sir. So it's not part of Simon's discussion now. He hasn't been asked to consider that as part of the
No,
looking at the
it'll
future
be a
of the
separate
contract.
contract.
Okay,
One.
well, I'm happy
There's
to.
different ways to cut it, excuse the pun. But there are different ways that everyone does it with different councils. But there's some good templates out there in terms of the way forward. I'd like to table that in the future discussion council. We'll definitely want to have it. I'll endeavour to get it on to May's council meeting if possible.
That's great.
May's council meeting. Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Rob, for the questions and Bill and Simon for the answers. Put the resolution again. Someone prepared to move that. Billy Manera, second. Joe Parsons, all those in favour? Right. Those against? The resolution's carried unanimously, and I now thank the subcommittee members, staff, and those watching from the comfort of their home or elsewhere electronically. Thanks for your attendance at the meeting today, your contribution. It's appreciated, and I'll declare the meeting closed.